It's Monday. It is great to have everybody with us today. We talked last week about whether or not the government shutdown did anything positive for the Republican Party. I said I couldn't really think of anything positive, but I said, please write to me, email me, comment on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. And I got a bunch of comments, and one of them is from Steve, who wrote a really great letter. And I'm just going to read to you parts of it because I think he makes some interesting points. And then Lewis, we'll discuss whether we think he's onto something here. Steve says, politically, the Republicans lost badly, but this doesn't actually matter to either wing of the Republican Party. The establishment Republicans, the corporate Republicans, do whatever their donors want anyway. And those corporations don't care nearly at all about partisan wins or losses. They only care about policy wins, which is why the same interests fund both parties. Meanwhile, the Tea Party lunatics aren't fazed by the political loss because they actually think they won the political battle and that the vast silent majority is being persuaded over to their side. Besides, there aren't that many sane people who didn't already hate the Republican Party before the shutdown. They don't have that much to lose politically, especially when they can do so much damage with just a small contingent of radicals in one body of Congress. They obviously don't need to be a nationally electable party to still retain tremendous power. Is it that big of a deal that their approval went from the high 20s to the low 20s? And Steve goes on to say, the political horse race is less relevant than it seems. On policy, every moment where the public is convinced that the government cannot function well enough to even keep its lights on is a huge victory for conservative ideology. More so since the Democrats are always going to be hamstrung by a desire to govern, something Republicans don't care about. The more Republicans threaten shutdowns and remain obstinate, the more Democrats are forced into bargaining with them in order to get them to do even simple tasks. The next time Republicans threaten a shutdown, it'll be that much closer to Harry Reid saying, okay, fine, we have huge problems, just don't shut down the government and we'll promise to cut corporate taxes, for example. In other words, by doing nothing, by having the government do nothing, Republicans win on ideology and they also win on policy because the Democrats get nothing positive done and are increasingly blackmailed into unnecessary compromise. Very, very interesting, Lewis. And then Steve wraps up by saying, this isn't going to be a big win for a lot of the current Republicans in the House. Many will lose their seats, but this is an enormous ongoing win for a movement whose goal is to burn down the government by any means necessary. So, Lewis, this is interesting because, yes, the government shutdown is widely considered to be the fault of Republicans. The government shutdown is widely considered to have been completely unproductive. However, the mere fact that government didn't do stuff could be perceived as a win by those who want to shrink government to the point where it barely exists. Do you think Steve's onto something here?
Yes, I do. But I still think that that is a very small group of people. And I guess the way we were kind of trying to gauge the success and or failure of this shutdown has yet to be revealed because we're kind of waiting for the midterms to see what happens there. So I think as a political move to get more votes and to get back in office, I think this was a failure on behalf of the GOP because I think most Republicans would not view this as an ideological win. But
that's exactly the point you're making, Lewis, which is where I disagree with Steve, which is I can't disagree with any of what Steve said in terms of how certain Republicans will see this. The disagreement I have is I think the wing that is still swayed by what happens in reality, right? So not the Tea Party lunatics, as Steve describes them, that will just see this as a win because they think it's really great to shut down government, and not the corporate wing that just cares about policy. I think there actually is a big enough wing that is influenced by how these decisions are perceived and that it actually could make a difference. It's just more of like a demographic disagreement I think I have.
Right. But that demographic that does think this is great definitely does exist. And for them, it was an ideological win. I just don't think they're big enough to matter, I guess.
That's where I'm at on this. And I'm curious to hear now if you have a reaction to Steve's letter, definitely let me know.